Welcome to Drawing with Vince Mancuso.
Placing figures in space. First thing you have to do is establish a horizon line and a vanishing point. And I would recommend putting a perfectly parallel horizon line and a perfectly vertical y-axis. You create a master figure. From there, you take projections back to the horizon line. And you can establish multiple vanishing points, right? This will allow you to move the figures around the space wherever you like, okay? Um, and you start building out your figures. This will allow you to fill the space and accurately place the figures on the same ground plane relative to the perspective. In this case, we've got a worm's eye view. Everything is kind of cutting through the shin of the figures as they're being taken back. The fuchsia lines you can see are my receding lines to the horizon line, the convergent lines, and then I project out and I sort of strategically move the figures to where I want to see them compositionally. I establish the coffin box, and then I can even make the figures bend by changing the proportions relative to what I want them to do. And you can see me here exploring the composition and then bringing the figures all into alignment. Now I'm popping in a highlight, playing the white against the black with the sort of neutral gray ground. No need for me to get too elaborate. This is good enough to explain the idea. And you can see how all the figures are working on the same perspective. 10 figures moving, dancing, reacting to each other, placing the cast shadows in blue just for fun. Okay? And you see the cast shadows create the feeling of the ground. Now I'm going to show you a different technique. The perspective grid is in the top right-hand corner to the far right. And all I'm doing here, instead of projecting back, is when I'm drawing my figures, all of the clavicle shoulder is running through the horizon line that I created. Now remember, you're the artist, so you decide. If you're going to do a human's eye view, it's cutting through the shoulders, it's cutting through the eyes. If you're going to do a low angle to a worm's eye view, you're cutting through the knees or you're cutting through the shins. I'm just blocking the silhouette shapes based on the 8-head proportions, moving these figures around and creating an interesting composition, making sure I've got 10 figures. Again, this is Project 14, a breakdown of Project 14. 10 figures, 5 male, 5 female, dancing in space. Now I'll quickly start to ink the details, right? And this is what I mean about working efficiently. I'm not focusing on the details. I'm focusing on the big shapes and the proportions. I block them in as silhouettes. Now I'm going in and I'm pulling out the line work really, really quickly, just enough to indicate, female versus male, and to bring some character and life to the gesture with the contour line. I'm adapting as I go along. If I think something's out of proportion, I shorten it on the fly. This is direct and sort of improvised firsthand. A type of gestural shorthand that once you start getting the feel for this, you can block out composition so super quick. And get the big forms and the right gesture and the feel. And then as you keep working back over it, you can tighten things up and, refine things, work out your lighting. I'm not doing anything too complicated here as lighting. I've got a base middle tone acting as my light / dark. I'm using my black line to provide, the dark and the core shadow and the contour line. It's kind of an abbreviated shorthand. Going back, you'll see once I start popping in the highlight how that starts to give you the sense of light in the most simplest ways. This is the kind of exercise that you really want to repeat on a regular basis. Just sit down casually, establish a horizon line and a vanishing point, then start to project your figures throughout the space based on the location that the horizon line intersects. You can see here I've chosen the shoulders, and the figures in the foreground or in the middle ground, you can see I'm making them bend forward. So I've compensated for that. For example, if they were to stand erect, their collarbone and shoulders would cross through the horizon line. This is how I know that they're all situated on the same ground plane based on this shoulder level perspective grid that I created earlier. It's really a very simple idea, and if you just check your proportions and think it through and use critical analytics, you can start to break down the logic, and it can provide for you all the necessary information to create a complicated figurative composition like this in an incredibly short period of time. Most two methods, you see. There's the horizon line sort of cutting through. Now I'm putting in the highlights, right, which give it the indication of light and give it a little bit of pop. Of course, when you do your project 14, you are to use all of the lessons so far: the light, the dark, the core shadow, the cast shadow, the highlight. Cast shadows are going to be very important. You're going to see them come in shortly, and they'll ground all the figures to the ground. It's so important. Like right now, they're kind of floating because you're not getting any cast shadow. But as soon as I start putting in the cast shadow, you'll see how the ground plane reveals itself. Okay, and that's all I want. I just want you to focus on the figures and the cast shadows and establishing them on the ground plane relative to the perspective grid. In this case, of course, it's at shoulder height, as was revealed by the fuchsia horizon line. And you see now the figures are being grounded relative to their position. And I'm not getting too particular. You just feel the general shapes. They're overlapping, so some of them are melding into each other because the figures are clustered together. There are the 10 figures. Have fun. Draw. Remember, speed is God, and through repetition, the quality will catch up. Right? These are just exercises. They're not meant to be pretty drawings. They're meant to be accurate and feel right and get that right gesture. Don't overthink it. Just dig in. Remember, your proportions are the key. Get your proportions right. Your figures will be believable. Then everything else is a bonus.